Is it on? Okay. Another friend of mine asked me how I wanted to be introduced. And the thing is, like, if someone gives you a long introduction, I'd just be stood there saying, it's my time. Come on, get me on the stage. You know. So no matter. I'm Paul. That's my introduction. It's a big stage, isn't it? The last time I was on a stage, no, sorry, not last time, a long time ago, I was on a stage in Sweden. I was talking to the Swedish Association of Software Testers, SAST. I don't know if anyone's from Sweden. Anyone knows that? But it's like the Swedish SIGIST kind of thing. And they were very nice people. And they put me on a stage, and it was like so big. And I was doing my usual thing of walking around, and I was sort of marching and gesticulating, this, that, and the other. And there was a lady down at the front, and she was kind of an older lady, a bit like me, only I'm a man. And every time I walked to the corner of the stage down here, she kind of flinched and went like that, which I noticed. And I thought, well, she's still doing it. And I said, excuse me, are you okay? And she says, I think you're going to fall off the stage. And I said, no, don't worry about that. I've been doing it for years. You know, it's only a foot high, whatever. And about 1 minute later, I fell off the stage. So I'm not going to fold this one in. I could do myself an injury. So I'm just going to plug that in. So I'm kind of just about squeezed on. I think that's absolutely fine. Thank you. So I want to talk about something that I've been promoting for about 3 years now, 2 to 3 years, about how we think as testers. Although I'm going to broaden it and talk about how we think as software people, okay? What I want to talk about is this idea of how we think, because in some ways, you know, I love tools, Cucumber, fantastic product, like it, love it, the whole open source thing. I'm very much into that. Everything I do now is in open source. But tools aren't the point. It's what happens in between your ears that is the real point issue, isn't it? You know, we know that actually the problems we have in software development are mostly human problems. Mostly they're about communication. But before you can communicate, you need to be able to think and to interpret what other people say to you. So I'm kind of obsessive, you know, in my kind of dotage, let's say, although I don't feel as old as I should do, perhaps. But I'm much more focused on how we think more than how we do the technicalities of testing, which I will call logistics. Okay? So let me just make some progress. Okay? My zapper doesn't work. Oh, that's why, because it's not turned on. Oh, it does work. So the problem I've had over the years with testers and test managers in particular is that Agile brought huge pressure to bear on people who were working in, let's say, traditional environments, and then were told, you know, you're going Agile. And Agile is a transitive verb, isn't it? You know, people are agiled. You know, there's a victim in this game, isn't there? And quite often the victim was the tester. And so I had lots of people come up to me and say, you know, Paul, I've got this problem. I don't know where I fit anymore. There's no role for test managers, for a test lead in my projects. I used to run a team of 7. Now I've got a team of 7 on 7 projects. What do I do? And like, you know, am I your uncle? You know, just sort of agony aunt or whatever. You know, but anyway, I've had that for about 10 years, since Agile really begun to sort of take shape and to make progress in the world. And now we're in the midst of, I think we're about 20% in our Agile transformation. So I'm very, what's the word? Not pessimistic, it's the wrong word. I've got a very low opinion of the performance of our industry in making change like that, because it will take a generation. We're about halfway there in terms of time, probably 20, I mean, maybe 30, 40%, I don't know. I have no data, okay? I've only got anecdotal evidence. But most people are still struggling to come to terms with how Agile works in the testing community, right? And I'm focusing on that for a second. And now we've got things on the horizon like, you know, digital. I mean, how many people are working on digital projects now? Is anyone not working on digital? Okay, one, okay? So has the world suddenly changed in 2 or 3 years, or is it just a load of marketing hype? I'm a cynic. I think most of it is marketing hype. But I believe there's something in this game, because digital will span all of the technologies that are emerging now, the whole Internet of Things, AI, machine learning, drones, 3D printing, the whole bloody shooting match. I mean, digital will lose its meaning fairly soon. It'll just become IT, won't it? So the challenge with testers in particular is, again, if we're being pushed into a digital world and we have to react so much faster and we have to automate almost everything, testers feel a little bit exposed because everyone's saying automate, 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 but the tester cannot automate their thinking, at least not yet. So in order to react to this and being pushed around a little bit, and as I say, they're kind of a victim, although I don't want to dwell on that side of it. They're being put under pressure. And where does testing fit into processes which are fully automated? Because running 1 million tests is easy. Creating 1 million tests is not so easy. And that's a problem that's not going to go away. And just let me say that I'm not just talking about, testers at the end or the tester in the team. We all test. Developers test more than testers do, don't they? I should say I'm a developer. I know it's going to disappoint some testers around here. But my argument for this is, I think we need a new way of thinking about how we test, right? So I'm going to sort of be very arrogant and make a suggestion and give you a proposal for how I think you think when you test, okay? And that's kind of the goal. So in some ways it's like, God, he's got a cheek, hasn't he? How can he tell me how I think? I'm not going to tell you how I think. I'm going to say, these are the patterns of thinking I think we all go through. And if it helps you understand how you behave in your projects and in your teams and in your reactions to change that is not wanted and to stakeholders who can't get what they want, maybe it will help. So, my argument is we need a new way of thinking, a new model. I'm going to use that term. And I'm going to suggest it's free of logistics, which I'll explain in a moment. Now, I'm going to talk about models quite a lot, and my other obsession, apart from thinking, is modeling, okay? And when we test, when we write code, we are building mental models in order to think, in order to understand how a system, piece of software should work. So let me argue this point here. Here's this handsome fellow who's thirsty, and he's standing a few feet away from a glass of water. Now, in order to walk a few steps, from where you are to where the bottle of water is, your brain has to understand the configuration of something like 100 bones in your body. Okay, you've got 206, I believe, but about 100 of them are involved in movement. Certainly 100 muscles are involved in movement. So in order to move from one place to the next, take a few steps, your brain has to build a mental model of how your body is configured, all the tensions in all the muscles, okay, in all the muscles that matter. It has to send to orchestrate a set of nerve impulses to all these muscles, second by second, but much faster than that. And do it with a piece of jelly that isn't as fast as a PC from 10 years ago. How does it do this? It must build some simplification. It must build what I would call a model. Now, I have no idea what that model looks like, and I can't possibly describe it to you, but I just know it exists. So my argument to you and to the software industry is that we have this fantastic modeling engine. Let's use it. Or let's think about how we use it and take advantage of it, because we have it as an asset. Let's exploit it. So, anyway, with that kind of rather heavy-handed introduction, my question here is, all this sort of about modeling sounds kind of theoretical. Oh, UML, that's what you mean. No, I don't mean that. For every word, for every sentence I say the word model, you could substitute the word understanding. In order to understand the complexity we have to deal with, we build mental models. And those mental models inform what we do as testers and as developers, because you need to model to write code just the same as test. So that's kind of the byword. When I say modeling, I mean understanding. And I don't care whether you write your models down or not. Maybe they're just held in a few neurons in your brain for a few seconds. That's still modeling, okay? So bear with me. There will be some method in this madness. I did have a drink. So the first thing I want to say is, historically we've been completely obsessed with requirements. And yet when anyone comes to build software or to test software, we have multiple sources, don't we? We have a requirements document, maybe. We have some stories, maybe. But we also have the old system if we're replacing it. We have people who contribute knowledge to our world, if you like, to our team, and help to direct us where we're going. We have our own experience, our own knowledge, which influences us greatly. We also have our own prejudices and biases and all the other stuff that gets in the way, all the noise, if you like. So our sources of knowledge, are fallible and incomplete. We know this, okay? So we have to take a broader view of all these inputs, if you like. Quite often the people we talk to don't agree. And we have to make sense of this as an individual, but as a team. Collaboration is about flushing out these inconsistencies, ambiguities, gaps, duplication, whatever. Do you get the idea? So if you like, we have something between our ears that can model, and we have these sources, these senses almost, that we're being bombarded with, okay, in terms of information and knowledge, data, to help us to understand how to build software or to test it. So what I want to do is to say, right, in order to understand how I react to this week's process, okay, if the world is changing so bloody fast, how do I react? Well, I'm going to say, do I really understand how I think as a tester? How am I going to get to this modeling activity in my brain? How am I going to understand it? And the way I'm going to suggest we do it is we forget logistics, okay? So I'm going to suggest this, and I'm going to say it in a very specific way. For the next 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to say this. I do not care whether you write your tests down or not. I don't care whether you have written requirements or verbal requirements. I don't care. It's not relevant. I don't care whether you run a tool to run your tests or you do it manually or you use some piece of magic or the Vulkan mind meld or whatever the hell it is. I don't care, right? I don't care what business you're in. I don't care what technology you're in. I don't care, what's the last one? Whether you're agile, waterfall, BDD, continuous, DevOps, I don't care. It's not relevant to the way you think about processing information and to derive good tests and good software designs. So now we've all taken the blue pill, okay? You've got to imagine some people will say, hold on, there's nothing left. Well, that might be good, but I think there is. What I think is left is how we think about testing, right? So let me use that kind of blank sheet for the next few minutes to talk about how I think about testing now. So let me make a statement. And if you learn nothing else in the next sort of 15 minutes or whatever it is I've got, remember this. All testing is exploratory. This is what we do. We explore our sources of knowledge, be it documentation, standards, specs. We interview people, we have meetings, we stand up in front of whiteboards, we collaborate, we think, we use our own experience, we look at the old system, we look at the new system. These are all sources. And in order to make sense of it, we build models, test models, we build our understanding in some magical way, okay? And when we have that model, when we think we understand what the system should do, and you've all had that moment where you think, this is a mess, this is a mess, this is a mess, I think I understand. At that moment, you're ready to think about testing. You're ready to think about situations, examples, whereby you can force the software down certain routes to learn something about it, whether to find a bug or just to demonstrate something works. But, I should say, so to inform our testing. So our mental models don't tell us what to test. They don't sort of generate test cases. But we have a picture that we can draw upon to select important things to test that have relevance to ourselves and our stakeholders, okay? And that's it. That's the kind of the message from the top of the mountain, okay, from that high up. So now what I want to do is I want to go a little bit halfway down the mountain and just give you kind of what I might call the helicopter view and talk about these two modes of thinking. We explore and we test, okay? So the first thing is on the left-hand side, we've got this, okay, I'm exploring. I'm talking to people, I'm reading, I'm thinking, I'm building mental models, I'm documenting them, I'm creating stories, I'm generating Gherkin script, whatever the hell you're doing, I don't care, that's logistics. And I built a model, and when I believe I understand things well enough, my model is adequate, good enough, it's ready, I trust it, that I think I'm correct here, then we can create our tests. But what happens then is when we run our tests, we discover things that we hadn't anticipated, and we discover, actually, maybe our model isn't perfect. So then we have to go back and say, yeah, you know, you said the system should do this in this scenario, you know, given when, then, da-da-da-da. It doesn't quite work that way. I don't think it's wrong, but I think it's different from what you intended. What do you think? Have you ever had that? Have you had to go back to a user and say, what did you really mean? Because I'm not sure anymore because my tests are making me think there's something else going on here. There's something missing, or there's an ambiguity, or there's a conflict. I put the same thing in twice, I get two different answers. Something's wrong here. You get the idea? So we have this kind of, this loop. We want to be on the right, but quite often we're stuck on the left. And right in the middle of all this is this green blob I'll call judgment. Now, I cannot tell you what's inside the green blob, but I know it's there. Isn't it? We all have to use our judgment to decide what to do next. Where do we go for our information next? Do we schedule a meeting, a call? Do I tap the developer on the shoulder and say, what's your take on this? Whatever it is, okay? It's called collaboration, isn't it? So, and this is the point where I sort of say, do developers think the same way? I haven't got time to dwell on this, but I think the answer is probably yes. A developer who sees, say, a story or has the interview, is the tester present, you're both getting the same sources of knowledge, you have to do a modeling exercise and in order to understand how to write code, how to test. It's okay, I've got it. And I've lost my thread there. Yes, so do developers think the same way? I think yes, they've got a different goal in mind, but you could say, well, they're writing code. Well, no. Show me the tests. Their deliverable are passing tests, aren't they? And shouldn't we be treating that as their deliverable? So actually, we're much closer aligned with testers and developers than we think, okay? So anyway, so that's kind of the left-right side of the picture. So I want to go into a bit more detail now, and I'm going to do it really quick, I'm sorry, but I only had 20 minutes. On the left, I've got my sources of knowledge. I inquire. I'm going to show you a series of words and transformations, and they all end ing. They're all doing words, if you like, verbs, if you like, activities, actions. Call it what you like, I don't care. This is not a rigorously mathematical model, okay? It's a picture to help us think about how we think. So we explore, we ask questions, we read. We model, okay? We build our understanding. Remember, modeling equals understanding. It's the same thing. And we have our model. When we have our model, when we understand what the system should do, we can then say, you know what? I can make predictions using my understanding. Given this, when that, then that should happen. Is that the right interpretation? Maybe I go back to my user and saying, are you sure you meant this? Because what you've told me so far makes me think that this is where we're headed. We haven't covered this kind of scenario, but let me try this one on you. So we have this feedback loop challenging our sources, and we have to have that. Otherwise, we are blindly being taken on a merry-go-round by our users who really aren't as well equipped to formulate perfect requirements as we'd like. So we have to, as developers, testers, BAs, whatever your role in the project, we have to take on this role and own this challenge of challenging our sources of information, okay? That's part of what the collaboration is. So if you imagine that's all gone to the left, now I'm on the right. I've got my model. I trust that I understand what the system should do. We trust, as a team, we have a shared understanding of what the software should do. Now, we can crack on and write code and write tests, okay? So the model informs our testing. It informs our programming as well, okay? When it comes to I have a test, and I've got all the stuff like data and environments and all that stuff. That's all logistics, okay? I know it's important, but it's logistics. Keep that to one side still for the time being. When we come to run the test, to apply it, to execute it, I use the word apply because I want to suggest that I do not care whether you use a tool, you do it manually, or some other piece of magic. That's not relevant to how I think because it's a robotic activity primarily. You could call it checking. I wouldn't argue against that, okay? When we run our tests, yeah, we get passes and fails. So the passes and failures are happening in the application, the applying the test. When we get to the 99 greens and 1 red, that's when the human comes in and when we have to interpret what we've just seen. And that interpretation leads us either to maybe log a bug. So this isn't part of the model, but you can understand that's a loop that's obviously got to be there. So I'm not going to dwell on this. Certainly, I report progress. I mean, I'm testing on behalf of someone else, usually. Unless I'm the developer of my own code, I'm my own stakeholder. But usually, a tester is testing on behalf of someone else. We report progress, our interpretations. Sometimes we have to go back to our model and say, you know what, it's a bit more complicated, needs a bit more tweaking. So maybe you go back and rethink some aspects of the model. Maybe you need some more refined scenarios in your stories, whatever. Logistics, I don't care. Sometimes you hit something so serious that you have to go back to the sources of knowledge again and say, we found something we can't explain. Perhaps you can help us, Mr. User. So when you glue it all together, it looks something like this. It looks a bit like a bug. I'm sorry, that wasn't intentional. It's just the way it turned out. And I didn't just do this in, half an hour in my spare time. It's probably taken a couple of years thinking, and then I had run a couple of workshops with friends of mine, and we kind of created a model. We had a couple of iterations and so on and so forth. But that's what it kind of came out like, okay? If you're interested in what I'm just saying right now, there's a talk I did at the BBC, not on the BBC, but for the BBC Open Day, for their recruits, if you like. But that's the picture, if you like. This is not a process with entry and exit points, entry and exit criteria, and procedures and inputs and outputs. It's just each ing word, inquiring, modelling, informing. These are just states of mind, So when you hit a problem, when you're collaborating and things aren't going so well, you might say, well, I'm into challenging the source of knowledge because I don't think we've got it cracked yet. Whereas the developer might say, oh, I'm writing code. Where are you on your thought process? And what I'm trying to suggest is that for closer collaboration, we need to be inside each other's pockets, almost be inside each other's minds to understand what's going on in our teams. Okay, so this might help. Now, new model in BDD. I mean, this isn't a well-researched piece, okay? This is my proposal. I was influenced greatly by BDD in putting the model together, okay? But essentially, you could say the stuff to the left is all the collaboration bit. Yeah, I could have put I could have put 4 blocks to say the 4 activities, but you know what's going on. It's kind of obvious. Creation of the tests. Maybe I use a tool. Maybe I just think my way through it. Whatever. I've got execution, feedback, and story refinement, where I discover things that kind of scare me a little bit. Okay. So that's how I think and how I map these things to BDD. Now, I said at the beginning, I don't care about tools. I don't care about how you achieve certain things. This is logistics. So I don't care. This might be blasphemous in a Cucumber show, but I don't care whether you use Cucumber or not. With respect to BDD, it's just another tool to support modeling, and it does the test generation, the step generation. I know it's more than that, but bear with me. What I'm trying to suggest is that BDD is the important thing. So if you use a different tool to capture your requirements other than stories, surely that's cool. Okay? It's the collaboration that counts, and that's what's being said. What's being said by the advocates of BDD, that it's not the tool you use, it's the thinking and collaboration, and that's how you make progress. Okay? So, this is ominous. So, I don't care whether you capture your stories as state models. And in fact, if you look at a state model, a state transition diagram, okay, they're as old as the hills, okay, X machines, all that kind of stuff. What's the difference between a state model and a scenario in a Gherkin story? Not much. So all I'm trying to say is you're in good company, The tools we use don't matter, but they have to support our thinking. And I think it's exampling that is the most important thing, and that's what we get from tools like Cucumber, because those examples allow us to challenge our sources. We define our systems through example, but we challenge our sources through example, saying, here's an example, I don't think it works, but I don't say that. I just ask the question, what do you think of this? And let them work it out for themselves if it's inconsistent or ambiguous or whatever the hell. Okay, so I'm nearly done. Very quickly, if you look at all the action words I mentioned on the picture, to a testing community, I would say these are the skills we should be looking at. There's some really fascinating ones here that are not on the certification schemes. Socratic questioning, what the hell is that doing there? Well, Socratic questioning is about when a lawyer asks a question in a courtroom, they only ask questions they know the answers to. Were you in this place on that time, da-da-da, wearing these clothes, whatever. They know the answer because they want a yes. In the same way, when we challenge our users and say, here's an example of the software working according to our model, our story, given this, when that, then that. What do you think of this? Doesn't make sense, does it? So Socratic questioning is part of our skill set. So, and all the other stuff. Predicate logic. For God's sake, we talk about logic all the time in software, but no one does a predicate logic course. Has anyone done a predicate logic course? Ah, excellent. Oh, I'll refine my... I won't say that again. Ever, ever, ever. Okay, so I drew a picture of a kind of skills matrix or whatever, sort of kind of a roadmap of how you might operate as a professional in the testing world. And my conclusion was that the certification schemes come over here. If you look at the table of contents for the certification schemes carefully, what you will see is all the stuff to do with logistics that I said I don't care about. And that's my case for saying that the existing certification schemes will not make you a better tester. So I'll shut up with that. A rather negative note, but I'm done. Thank you.